In lesson 14, we begin to use the ratio tables, equations, and double number lines to then plot things on the coordinate plane. Value is going to be the most important part of your ratio, and therefore you need to keep reminding yourself in order to find value, we have to write a fraction. They have a place that they're going, and Kelly is traveling by train with her soccer team from Yonkers, New York to Morgantown, West Virginia for a tournament. The distance between Yonkers and Morgantown is 400 miles. The total trip will take 8 hours. The train schedule is provided below. Our ratio is right here. So the distance between these places is 400 miles, and the total trip is 8 hours. So we have 400 miles, 8 hours. So our ratio is 400 to 8. And that would be miles to hours. Below, it asks you to create a table to show the time it will take Kelly and her team to travel from Yonkers to each town listed in the schedule, assuming that the ratio of the amount of time traveled to the distance traveled is the same for each city. Then extend the table to include the cumulative time, which is like the whole time, it will take to reach each destination on the ride home. So we have a ratio of 400 to 8. But in order to create a ratio table, we want to start from the most simple form of that ratio. So with 400 to 8, I want to think, what can 400 and 8 both be divided by? Well, my hope is that they both can be divided by 8, because if they both can be divided by 8, that would make this a 1, which would actually give me a rate. And that would be 1 hour. They could tell me how far they would go. So now I'm going to check and see. Can 400 be divided by 8? Well, 40 divided by 8 is 5. I get a 0, bring down my 0. 0 divided by 8 is 0, which gives me 50 miles in 1 hour. But this does kind of complicate things, because on my table, they don't give me enough space to show the whole distance. What they do give me is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. And so if on the way there, it's 400 miles, and on the way back, it's 800 miles, that means that I have 800 miles of stuff that I need to fit on 8 separate blocks. And so I'm going to take 800 divided by 8. That means I'm going to do 100 for each thing, which would then mean I have 400 to 8, and now I just took this side times 2 to get 800, so I have to take this side times 2 to figure out my other side of the ratio, which would be 16. And so I took 800 divided by 8, because it's the 8 spots, so I know that each spot will have to be 100. And then on this side, I have to do the same thing. I need to take my 16 divided by 8, and that means that I'm going to be working with the ratio of 2 hours and 100 miles. So my ratio table then would just look like this. 2 to 100, and then I'm counting by 2's on this side, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and hundreds on this side, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, which would give me my entire trip. Over here is the explanation. So 8 boxes means I need to take my 16 divided by 8 for my hours. And the reason it's 16 is because on the way there, it's going to be 8 hours, and that's from the ratio at the top. So our way there is 8 hours, and our way back is another 8, which is 16. And since it asks us the cumulative for the ride, that would be there and back. So that's the 8 plus 8 is 16, which means our first number in the ratio for the total trip there would be 16 divided by 8, which is that 2. And then because we had to travel 400 miles there, plus the 400 miles back, which gives you the 800, I had to take 800 divided by 8 so that I would have the 100 miles for the second number in the ratio. You do not have to write all of these words down. This is simply just an explanation so you understand in writing how I got that 2 to 100. On the next page, you actually have a double number line, and we did this 2 days ago. On our double number line, it says create a double number line to show the time it will take Kelly and her team to travel from Yonkers to each town. Then extend the double number line to include the cumulative time, which is what we did before on that ratio table, and that was the 8 hours for the, or the 16 hours for the 800 miles. And to show how long it would take them to reach the destination on the ride home. And it said represent the ratio of the distance traveled on the road trip to the amount of time taken with an equation. So we'll start with our double number line. And like we did yesterday with the double number line, we're just going to label it with the same numbers. So you start with 0, because if they haven't traveled anywhere, it's 0. Then our next one was a 2, so it's just 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. And down here, we were counting by hundreds, so that's 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. Now, the question that they asked us was below, and it says, using the information for the double number line, how many miles would be traveled in 1 hour? Well, my top is my hours, the bottom is my miles, and so I need to figure out where is 1 hour. Well, I go from 0 to 2, so that means this is the part I'm going to be finding it. There's only one number between 0 and 2, so I drew my line and I put a 1 down. Well, then I have 2 parts, but to get to 1, I just need one of those parts, which gives me 1/2 of this total. So that's 1/2 times my total distance, which was 0 to 100. So 1/2 of 100 gave me 50, which means the other side would be 50. Which means I can give the answer to the question. It says, using the information, how far can she go in 1 hour? Well, she can go 50 miles. And then it says, well, how do you know that? Well, I know that because if the train is moving at a constant speed, half of 2 hours is 1 hour, and half of 100 miles is 50 miles. In equivalent ratios, you have to multiply or divide by the same number for both of them in order to determine what the new ratio would be given whatever information they're asking to find. Down below, we're actually going to create a coordinate plane given specific information. So it says that dinner service starts once the train is 250 miles away from Yonkers. That's the minimum time that players will have to wait before they can have their meal. So we know that our ratio is 1 to 50. And we know that that's actually the ratio because we found it here on the double number line. Also, on the page before, when we were trying to figure out how to label the ratio table, we were able to simplify 400 to 8 down to 50 to 1 just by creating an equivalent ratio. And so that's what we're going to be labeling this double number line with. It's also easier to plot the points on the coordinate plane. You could have done 2 to 100, 4 to 200, 6 to 300, 8 to 400, and 10 to 500 if you wished. This is just easier. So I recommend anytime you're given a ratio to simplify it to the simplest form of that ratio and then begin creating your ratio table, unless you need a skip count to get to the number they're asking about. So this one, they're asking me about 250 miles. And so I believe it's easiest to count by 50 so that I can get to that 250. So we have 1 to 50, 2 to 100, 3 to 150, 4 to 200, 5 to 250. So right here, we actually have our answer. We wouldn't even have to plot it. But I'm going to go ahead and plot it to show you. So we have an ordered pair of 1 to 50 right there, 1 to 50. An ordered pair of 2 to 100, which is there. And an ordered pair of 3 to 150. And we have the ordered pair of 4 to 200 and 5 to 250. If you would have just written the 2 to 100, 4 to 200, 6 to 300, the points on here, I'm going to show you what it would look like. But if you notice what I did, because I think it's hard to put my number on each line because they're so close together, I actually skip a line and then put a number. So I had 0 in the origin, right here. Skipped a number, I put a 1. Because this is my x, I had to label it hours. So that's 1, skip 1, 2, skip 1, 3, skip 1, 4, then I skipped 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then skip counting by the same way that I had into my y. I skipped 1, 50, skipped 1, 100, skip 1, 150, skip 1, 200, then 250, 300, 350, 400, 450, 500. Now, I'm going to use a highlighter to highlight if I were to use the ratio from the ratio table before, which was that 2 to 100. So if I had 2 to 100, my 2 is here, my 100 is there, where they meet, gave me the point there. Then the next one would be 4 to 200. My 4 would be here, my 200 is there. And then 6 to 300 would be the next one on the table from the other page. And I'd go up 6 to here, and then I'd have my point right there. What you're able to do then is take a ruler or a piece of paper, and if you connected these dots, this line goes right through there, and then I actually could go and answer their question. Their question asked about, what about how far or how long would it take them to get to 250 miles? So then I can go to my coordinate plane and go, okay, where would 250 be? Well, 250 is between 200 and 300, so I'd go here, and then I'd say, where does that hit my line? Well, that hits my line right here. So how many hours was connected? And I'd go down, and it's 5 hours. And so I could actually tell them, well, then I know that they would have to wait at least 5 hours to get there. Like I said, though, I think it's much easier for you just to simplify it and then prove it on the graph. And so if I simplified it, I got that 1 to 50, and then I actually had the answer already on the table, and all I needed to do was support it by graphing it, showing another way that makes the answer true.